Right, the recording should have started, Chair.
That's great. Thank you. Afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending the meeting tonight, Scrutiny for Corporate Performance and Resources. Before we get going, we'll start with the announcement. That is that, can I remind everybody, this meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording will be archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when you're not speaking in order to avoid background noise when others are speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, please raise your hand if you have your camera on, or use that raise hand function button. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function, and that's for the sake of this recording. The use of the chat function should be reserved for any technical issues you have, and also to alert me or the Democratic Services Officer. So that's our announcement over. So if we start with agenda item 1, which is our apologies for absence. I'm not sure if we've got any for tonight. I haven't been made aware of any.
Councillor Carroll has his hand up, Chair.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Stephen Haynes.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. If we then move on to agenda item 2, and that's the minutes of our previous meetings. That would, first of all, from May the 24th. And we also had an urgent item, which we all received yesterday, of our minutes from June the 21st meeting as well. So if we can include both of those in this section, if everybody's had a chance to look at them, and if you have done and everyone is happy with the content, we can move on that. If I can have a hand. Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Wonderful.
And just to confirm, Chair, that's for approval for both minutes, for the
yes, please.
24th
that's
and
yes,
the urgent
and the
item.
urgent item from the 21st.
Lovely. Thanks, Chair.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Committee.
Thank you, Mark. Agenda item 3 is our declarations of interest. I don't know if anybody has made a declaration tonight or has one to make now. Okay, speak now, forever hold your peace. Okay, that's great. Let's move then on to agenda item 4, which is the sickness absent report 22-23. This is our first reference from Cabinet, which sat on the 22nd of June 23. And I think we've got Laith to take us through the report. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, good evening, everybody. So as the Chair just said, obviously this is running through the report for the 2022-23 sickness absence for the council. What I'm going to do is probably just run through just a few sort of key points through the report rather than going through every single page, because you've obviously had opportunity to read that. And then I think it's probably more important that we have probably the questions and answer sort of session, just to again to provide some context and any sort of issues you want to raise. I think that probably works better. So obviously, I think it's worth mentioning as well as part of this report. I think following feedback from the last scrutiny meeting that we changed the report slightly and making sure that a lot of the data and the appendix are in the appendices rather than the main body of the report. So again, we just made sure that change happened. So I think it's pretty obvious from the data that sickness has increased. Comparing that data from 2021 to 22, I think it's worth mentioning. Obviously, again from that data, we just came out of the pandemic. There are a lot of issues happening, sort of nationally as well. So we felt actually there was probably no surprise that actually absence was potentially going to increase across the authority. And I think what we found also from a school's perspective, actually they had quite a significant rise within the schools sort of population. And as we know, schools are almost 50% of the workforce, so any increase within that school's sort of data is going to have that overall effect of increasing that absence overall council-wide figure. We mentioned obviously external pressures, facing staff and the general population, again from last year, the cost of living sort of crisis, fuel prices, inflation, mortgage increases. we've also seen delays in terms of staff seeing NHS appointments and so on. So some of those delays are causing staff to remain off sick because they haven't been able to reach the support they need as well in terms of trying to get back to work from their sort of illnesses as well. So there's a lot of external pressures that we're seeing that's being faced that we're trying to manage corporately. From an occupational health perspective, I think it's worth mentioning again the type of work that we're trying to do, I suppose, from a council-wide perspective, of trying to support our staff that are on the sick, and whether that's short-term or long-term absence. From an occupational health perspective, our timescale for actually seeing individuals who want an appointment with our occupational health team is around 4 weeks at the moment, anything from 4 to 5 weeks, and that's always been fairly consistent even throughout COVID and recently. And actually that timescale, even though it sounds a lot, is actually pretty good in terms of other authorities and organisations that we speak to on a wider level when we have sort of wider occupational health meetings. We're aware of some authorities and some NHS departments that it can take anything from 8 to 12 weeks and longer to actually see staff from the occupational health appointment perspective. So I think, again, we're doing pretty well, I think, of trying to keep that timescale as low as possible. Like anything, we'd like that to be, quicker, but it's something that we're working on. But they say it's around 4 weeks at the moment to see someone through our occupational health team. As part, obviously, the support through that sort of OC health team that we provide staff. We've got the occupational health screening where we can assess staff, as and when they want, really, actually, if they want to come in and have their BMI tested or cholesterol and things like that. That's something that staff can do. And that's something that we'll communicate a bit more, I think, across the organisation to make sure that's known across the organisation, and we can help support that. We obviously do the flu jabs every year with a really good take up of those around 2,000 staff that we end up jabbing every year, and holding things like our sort of more recent things like the menopause sort of sessions across the organisation, and again, not just for females to attend, but men as well. And I think that was really important messages coming forward. Again, as part of our usual checks with staff as well, that we do hearing assessments and hand arm vibration tests, things we would normally do as part of an organisation to manage all the different types of roles that we have within the organisation. Hepatitis B jabs and things for staff in those risky sort of areas of work. So it's quite varied, I think, the type of things that we do within the OC health sort of space. I think we've spoken before that we've got the employee assistance programme, where again staff got access to external support as needed. I think it's worth mentioning that current contract is actually coming to the end towards the end of September. So we're actually looking at some different providers potentially at the moment to see whether we can maybe get a slightly different service from our employee assistance program, and see what else is out there and anything new that we can offer staff. And finally, I suppose, again, a lot of OC health stuff at the moment, but I think it's quite important that we are launching our new occupational health system shortly. So we've been developing that over the last few months and weeks, and hopefully we should be live possibly again September, October time, where we're hoping that obviously that we'll have a proper system in place to manage our occupational health team and appointments. So it'll be a much slicker sort of process that will manage sort of the booking system, the reminders, and actually we'll get a lot more data from this system as well, which again I'm hoping we can actually start providing some better information to the directorates and to yourselves as as councillors and scrutiny as well. So as I said, there's a lot happening within that space, and and I suppose when we started looking at the data again, and we look at it every month and quarter, and we provide that information to you as Scrutiny on a 6 monthly basis. And I suppose it's just making that assessment that sometimes, of course, this sickness, a lot of it is outside of our control, and so it's really, I wouldn't say upsetting that the sickness has gone up from the council's perspective, but I think it's one of those things is just trying to manage the sort of perception of how sickness sort of happens, I suppose, you know, corporately. And yes, there's things that happen obviously internally, but I suppose it's just trying to manage all the different aspects of absence across the organisation. You know, we obviously, you know, have some really good support again, you know, from the managers. There's good training on our IDEV systems for managers managing sort of absence. Our HR business partners providing support, and again, obviously our OC Health team as well. So as I said, it's, you know, we're doing a lot of things that we would expect an organisation like us to do, and yet obviously sickness is still pretty high. You know, I think there's some information, I think, in the report, isn't there, about our comparison with other local authorities. And again, always that caveat, isn't there, about we're not all the same. We are operating services slightly differently, or, you know, again, you know, as an authority, we do a lot of stuff ourselves and internally. So we, you know, we have the catering, the cleaning, the waste management and things. So we do operate a lot of services that generally have high levels of absence. So it's just being mindful, I think, of that sort of going forward. I think it's also worth mentioning that, you know, again, we're trying to do other things, I suppose, as part of our work within HR and the council, looking at our pay, our reward and attraction sort of aspect of it as well. I don't want to sort of use that as part of this meeting, because I know there's other reports going off to cabinet and stuff, I think, tomorrow about our HR people strategy. But I think it's those sort of things that we're trying to develop and improve, you know, for our new staff coming in, for our existing staff, and trying to look at, you know, other aspects of work, you know, to make us a, you know, a good place to work, and hopefully that will help going forward. And actually, I will end on a bit of a positive news. We've had a look at the first quarter of this year's absence, and that does seem to have well, it has reduced based on the quarter one of last year. So I'm hoping when we come to the Q2 report of 2023-24 that there'll be a much better story. But let's wait until we get there. So appreciate there's a lot of information there. Just giving a flavour, I think, of the pressures I think we're all facing, not just in work, but obviously, you know, externally as well. And I suppose it's just how we're just trying to manage all those absences that are taking place, and really trying to you know, use the support mechanisms we have to support the staff, you know, and the managers who are managing the absences as well. So I think I'll probably stop there for now and probably open it up to yourselves to, you know, to ask any questions you have.
Thank you, Laith. And as you said, comparatively, it seems that this is a national trend, that
Yeah.
absences are going up. And as you said, if we look at our figures, an awful lot of it is to do with not work-specific stress.
Yeah.
And anybody who is living today, they can work in other local authorities, but we're all in the same environment, aren't we, with the costs of living? And it must be really, really difficult for anyone to look after themselves and to eat well and to keep fit if they're not able to pay their mortgage and they're not able to, you know, to feed their family. So I can see why preventive health would be really important, and initiatives like, you know, leisure centre free passes, things like that, so people don't have to pay for these things to keep fit. They would be a wonderful addition to what you're already doing, which looks really, really supportive. But I will open it up to everybody now. Councillor Carroll has his hand up. Would you like to ask Laith a question?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Leigh, for the presentation. These figures are really concerning, to be honest with you. I think that the increases are notable, particularly in certain directorates. And while I appreciate that there is a trend, I think perhaps the sector as a whole needs to look at that and see whether there are actions that need to be taken to address what is becoming a very serious problem. I mean, I'm concerned by some of the wording in some of the reports, so I will give you the opportunity to reflect on that, Lane, in case I've misunderstood it. I mean, I look at 4.2 where it states a number of initiatives have been introduced by the council to manage the key drivers in tackling presenteeism. Now, reading that, to me, that sounds as though an expectation that staff should work in the office is a problem, or is a perceived problem. Is that correct?
No, I was just seeing Tracy's hand sort of come up as well, but I think that's going to be based, I think, more about our approach to hybrid working, and I didn't think that there was a particular directive to say no, you must come into the office or you must do this. This is down to I suppose managers managing their I suppose their teams and their workload and seeing what best fits. So we haven't put a directive across the organisation to say this must happen. This is going to be, we can't direct our frontline services say, oh, actually, yes, you can work from home because that doesn't deliver a service, and vice versa. There's departments like mine, I suppose, that can have a lot of potential of working within the office, but actually we have that flexibility to make sure that if the work's being done and the best ability for those staff to deliver those services in what we think as managers sort of to manage that. So maybe again, I think we're an organisation that does so many different things. It's difficult, isn't it, to state something that we need to do across the board, otherwise it wouldn't work because we're offering so many different sort of services. I don't know if Tracy wanted to come in and clarify anything.
Are you okay for me to come in, Councillor Prothero? Is that
Yes,
okay?
please do.
Yeah.
Yes, please do. Please do.
Councillor Carroll, I just wanted to check something a moment, if that was okay, and just check what you meant by the question just before I respond to it. So in relation to presenteeism, that's not us asking people to come into the office and work a set number of days. This is in relation to individuals coming into the office when and well. So we were asked through our staff groups and through our staff networks, and also in our staff survey from our trade union colleagues, to ask the question on whether people were attending work whilst unwell, and therefore whether our sickness was actually higher potentially because we had individuals who were working when they were not well enough to do so. So our staff survey asked the question, do you attend work when you are unwell? So I just wanted to check with you, this the terminology presenteeism is not related to the council's position on attending work or not attending work. It's us trying to understand if we have a wider problem of staff who feel that they have to attend work when they don't feel well enough to do so, and how we as an organisation can look to support our staff groups so that they don't feel that way and that they are able to take the necessary periods of recuperation and rest when needed. So
right, okay. No, that explains
answer?
that. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And moving sort of onto that, Chair, if that's okay. I noticed that within certain directorates, HR, for example, I mean, there was a significant increase from 3.33 days lost per full-time equivalent to 9.98, which is almost, well, it is trebling it. And then also looking at other directorates, and I appreciate that these figures didn't represent that significant an increase, but I look at policy, for example, 12.4 days, financial services 14.87. That seems an awful lot. I mean, if I'm being honest with you, I cannot remember the last time I took any day of sickness absence at all. And 14.87, that's almost 3 weeks of the year in sickness absence. And I would be more understanding of this if these were sort of manual jobs, like obviously our refuse collectors. If you suffer an injury, for example, and there is that hazard, people working in building services, other maintenance related jobs, I can see how potentially you could suffer an injury or your working condition may prevent that. But it seems odd for a role that would be primarily desk-based to have an average of 14.87 days lost. That seems high, very high. And I was just asking if there was any particular reason for that.
Councillor Prothero, would you mind if I responded to that? Would that be okay?
Yes, of course.
I think, Councillor Carroll, we have to be really careful when we're looking at some of these statistics because they do relate to people. And those percentages, whilst the percentage increase is high, may only relate to 1 or 2 individuals within a department. So I have to put a strong caveat across that we need to be careful when giving some of this data across. In relation to the departments that you have, I suppose, picked up in terms of that report, that report relates to individuals that suffered significant traumatic bereavements.
Right, okay.
So, you know, you are absolutely correct when you make the statements that we are going to have higher incidence of sickness absence in our more manual areas, and we would expect that. But we are also going to have a position with some of our office directorates where just a very small number of individuals, which could be 1 or 2, experience
it
things
can bring the average up, though. I understand that.
And in relation to the data that you've chosen, and in relation to HR, the person that you the people that you're picking on in terms of the data, we sadly lost. So I think we just need to be careful when we're relating that data across.
No, I completely understand that. And as I say, I'm not picking on any individuals. It's broad point is when I'm presented with data in a report and it says to me there's a significant increase, I'm not doing my job if I don't ask a question as to why that's happened. And if you may indulge me, Chair, there's one final point I wish to raise as well, if that's okay.
Yes, far away.
It's just in relation to the non-work related stress. I note that it states in the policy that all employees are automatically referred to occupational health for advice as is standard practice. How many then take that opportunity up?
Do you want to respond to that, Laith, or do you?
Yeah, I was going to raise my hand, but I'll do that.
Okay.
Real now. Well, actually, they all take it up on the basis that we start that process. It's
mandatory, is it?
Yes, it is. It's mandatory in order to anyone who's on long-term sick. Now, what they'll do is attend the first appointment with the occupational health nurse. Now, of course, what they normally then get advised is they can seek further help from any external sources, whether that's their GP or other places. Now, sometimes that is an area where we have less control sort of over. But initially, anyone on whether it's non-work related or work related stress, they see our occupational health team.
No, thank you, Chair. Okay. That's all my questions.
And that's okay, and they're perfect. It's perfectly understandable where you can't actually see the numbers that work on a team to not really know if we're talking about lots of people with these percentages or just 1 or 2. And I understand what Councillor Carroll was saying.
Thank you, Chair.
So that's okay. So the next hand is Councillor Hanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify, George mentioned it just now, but could I just ask, are all employees free to come into the office to work if that's their choice of workplace, please?
Yes, I can confirm that. I don't know whether we need to say anything more than that, Tracy, but
no, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, Councillor Hanks, we do have in our hybrid working policy that we wish to seek to support people who want to do that. We recognise that for some people the last couple of years have been very difficult and loneliness has been present in some of our survey responses. So certainly if people want to come into the office and work, there is absolutely the facilities for them to be able to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. So a couple of quite hopefully brief points. Just in response to some of the issues we've already had discussed. I think the issue of presenteeism arose during the pandemic, in the sense that when people weren't coming into the office, there was a feeling that perhaps people might have been performing their work remotely whilst not being as well as they could be, and that I think as because we were there was a lower than anticipated level of illness being reported at that time. That was raised, within this committee, and also in Joint Consultative Forum at that time. I think there was also a point made by Councillor Carroll regarding the amount of time that's missed in general, and I think if you look at the final appendix, there are figures there related to absence by age, and whilst wouldn't wish to make any judgments based on that, clearly there is also an increase, generally speaking, once you reach a certain level of maturity, there is an increasing absence according to age, and that can obviously clearly affect across the piece. I wanted to say that I do think this, I did find this fairly easy to read, so I think that the movement to this as a format has been helpful to me. The one bit that I don't think I quite get is the numbering based around the pie charts that are within the document. I don't think that's necessarily clearly enough labelled for me, so maybe that's something to consider, what those numbers relate to, and also how easy it is as a reader to understand the key to that. Two further very quick points. We've been told, I think, here about our issues relating to increasing absences. However, the comparators that we have within one of the appendices here with other local authorities across Wales don't necessarily show the same trends, and in some cases there are. You can see some quite big jumps, but in other places you can see reductions. Now, that may be because there's an apples and oranges and carrots comparison taking place, but obviously, I would anticipate the same trend if across Wales. So I don't know what work or what value there is to any work about why those differences are occurring, but it would seem to me to be logical to assume that any trends that we're seeing are being seen elsewhere, and if that's not automatically the case, then there is a question that arises out of that. Although I would question, exact value of greater comparative work. And I was also just interested, as you've said, you've already suggested, Leith, that you've seen the figures for Q1. So a lot of our absences are because of the nature of the workforce within the council, that half of it is within the schools, and the school workforce has had a very high absence rate due to viral infection, which hasn't been quite so prevalent across the rest of the council during last year. I'd be interested to understand whether we've had a reduction more generally, even though the people working in schools are, of course, very public facing, and we are aware that there have been spikes in various infections in the last year, including obviously continuations of COVID-19. So it'd be interesting to see, how that's playing out in our schools going into Q1, as we come out of winter and out of the flu season, as it were, because obviously we have across our council departments, for want of a better term, it's clear that non-work related stress is the major driver, particularly long-term illness, but the viral infection seems to be very high amongst those who are in schools in very public facing work environments. Just we appreciate some quick comments on that, Leith, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So in terms of the pie chart sort of data, I'm happy to review that for the next meeting, just make sure that we've got that clear, and that's fine. So I appreciate that comment. Thank you. The comparative work then, as you say, with the other authorities, and you're quite right, isn't it? It is very difficult to understand the nuances, isn't it, between the different authorities on what that is. Now, I think we tried to contact the WLGA to actually, do some work for us to try and get some clarity on I suppose almost actually the different services that take
So,
place.
Les, do Data Cymru collect that sort of data?
Yeah, well, they do, which is where we've got this information from. But I suppose it was more about the services that each authority deliver, so we can actually say, well, actually, if they don't deliver waste services, or they don't deliver residential care, then that could be that could be one of the reasons why their absence is only at 9 days on average per person. So I think I wanted to get some clarity on that, but we just didn't get anything back. We can try again, and we'll see if we can raise that maybe at the next HRD group, Tracy. The Q1 data, I think you're quite right. I think it would be worth, I think because of the information we've had on schools in terms of the increase there, I think it'd be useful, I think maybe just for us to do a piece of work just on schools, just to see where that absence is. And you're right, and I suppose coming out of the pandemic, where I think a lot of people were separated and at home and probably not mingling, and then everyone comes back, and then the likelihood is that those flu and viruses get picked up, not only with the children but with the staff as well. And me speaking from experience, and my wife works in the school, so I could actually probably see that happening sort of personally. But yeah, I think we can probably do some assessments maybe at the next sort of meeting in November, and actually get some data just on the schools aspect. So I can't recall now if there was anything else that was on there, but I think Tracy's got a hand up as well. Don't know if you wanted to come in.
Yeah, it was only a really quick one, Councillor Johnson, just in relation to you picking up on some of the data dipping in certain areas. So we have reached out to those local authorities just to see what they're doing that may be a little bit different. We are not hearing or seeing anything from them that suggests they're doing anything differently to our approach and what we're doing. Having said that, one of them did come back to say that they chose not to remove the COVID absences. So for a period, if you remember, during the COVID period, it was a requirement for us not to include that data within our absence statistics. So they were set outside, if you remember, in relation to the reporting, and some local authorities have taken slightly longer to bring that back into the absence recording, and therefore certainly in one case that is accounting for why that you've still got the dip, or you've seen a dip in the figure, because they are still not including their COVID related absences in their sickness absences, and therefore I suppose there's an argument to be had that some of the viral infections that we are seeing in terms of an increase are potentially sat in outside of those figures in other local authorities. We are also reviewing our sickness policy currently. It's due for review anyway, and we've been liaising with Data Cymru Wales through the WLGA to look at running some different data subsets for us, and looking at how we could perhaps model our absence monitoring slightly differently. So one local authority we know has stripped out all regular meetings with employees. They've done that. I'm not suggesting that's something we were going to do, but it's interesting to see whether that's got any direct correlation with absence. They've been in that position now for about a year, and we're going to be liaising with them just to see whether that's given any statistical difference or trend difference from their absence reporting currently. So we do continue to liaise with all of our local authority colleagues, and actually wider, to see if anybody is doing something a little bit innovative in the space of sickness absence, and would welcome anyone bringing forward anything to us that we could explore, that they hear or see in a different organisation that could assist us with supporting our own workforce in some of the challenges that they're facing. So a bit of a plea, I suppose, from us really, that if there is anyone that is aware of some someone that's doing anything that's having a significant difference, we'd welcome that knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. I think next it's Councillor Wood.
Hi, good
Please
evening,
ask
Chair.
your question. Evening.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the layout of the report. It gives a lot more detail than we got last year, and gives some insight into different departments and things like this. But I noticed you say it's about 4 to 5 weeks to see an occupational health officer, and then there is a possibility that they are recommended to go to a GP or things like this. What is your policy on GP sign-off for things like non-work related stress? Is there a requirement for it, or how does this work within the council?
Yeah, as part of I suppose any absence, I suppose nationally in a way that you can self-certify obviously your first 7 days of absence. Now generally obviously that will come in from the individual. Of course, anyone then having absence over those 7 days needs to seek obviously medical sort of GP advice and get that fit, what's called a fit note, and really I suppose whatever you can say, almost whatever's written on that fit note is something that we would I suppose record as part of our absence against all the different levels of sort of reasons. So yeah, I suppose I suppose we try and be as specific as possible, and whether and we've mentioned obviously that sometimes the difference between work-related stress and non-work-related stress, because some of them are so aligned, I suppose, to a certain extent, but one can always feed into the other. But generally, yeah, anything over 7 days, they need GP as a fit note in order for us to make sure that they receive their correct sick pay. Obviously, but again, I suppose anything stress related, then obviously that feeds back into our OC health monitoring as well, and the 2 and 2 I suppose go hand in hand. I'm not sure if that's answer your question.
No, that's fine. I mean, but then obviously we have to help these people back to work, and that's my next question. So are they then expected to attend to the occupational health nurse, or attend ongoing help to alleviate these issues?
Yeah, if I just go in first and then Tracy can go. I suppose what we do, I suppose, with each individual is make sure that whatever advice and support we're going to give them matches what those individuals want and can do. So some will be quite happy to seek our counselling support. We've got a counselling service that they can then book 6 or 7 appointments that they can go to. We can write to their GP to provide further information about the support that they need, and maybe that will be enough for that individual. So I think it's a very difficult one to say this is the process that we do for each individual, because almost we have to treat everyone sort of differently. And some of them will be very open to have those sort of additional sort of discussions and sessions, and we always book with the OC health teams follow-up appointments again, assuming they don't come back, or even individuals can make appointments outside of the process even before they go on the sick. And I suppose it's that preventative measure, isn't it, rather than prevention rather than the cure, isn't it? So yeah, I think we're trying to do lots of different things just based on the individual that we're working with.
No, I understand. I mean, it's just, I remember last year asking what was classed as long term, and I think it was 28 days continuous absence.
Yes.
So I think it's important that, of course, you have to tailor what is required and what can be done and what can't be done. But at the same time, as these numbers are increasing, we need to put together a very comprehensive system to try to help people back into the workplace. And make sure that these numbers can't. It's sad to say numbers, because of course they are people, but at the end of the day, if people are stressed in their either workplace or non-workplace, and I notice there are breakdowns of bereavements and things like this, and of course those are awful things, but we have to actively try to help people to get better at the end of the day whether and then come back and contribute to the council.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if there was much of a structured process to make sure that people are engaged with, to make sure that that people improve their state of health so that they're able to come back to work. That was my main thing.
Yeah.
My main
Yeah.
question.
And you're right, exactly, that happens. I mean, we have, we have meetings with the managers. We've, again, we've got the HR business partners that are always on the case of all the absences and making sure the managers are following up with calls and meetings and appointments. So we've got I would say quite a robust process of trying to keep track of all these sort of things that are happening. But yeah, that's what we try and do, and hopefully we're just looking at our systems and processes again to make sure that we're always trying to improve the speed and not just the speed but the quality, isn't it, of how we're managing.
Well, the quicker the engagement can occur, I presume all of these things, the quicker people get help, the quicker anything can hope to improve, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Tracy, did you want to comment as well?
It's just a really quick one in terms of medical intervention and our occupational health department, just to provide some reassurance, really. So in relation to medical intervention, as Laith says, any individual going off sick for more than 7 days would have a medical intervention because they'd have to have a fit note from their GP. When they attend our occupational health team appointment, our occupational health GPs have to have an OH physician certificate, and therefore can actively bring an individual back into the workplace quicker, knowing the environment that they are working in. So we may often see potentially a GP signing somebody off work for a lengthy period, and then that individual come in to see our OC health team. Now, this doesn't always happen, but you will regularly see the OC health team making adjustments to a workplace to allow an individual to come back on a phased return far quicker than potentially they would have been with their own GP practice. So it's just to provide some reassurance that we put those interventions in very rapidly, very regularly, and with quite a degree of robustness. It doesn't always work. We can't always bring them back as quickly as they would like to or we would like to. But I'm incredibly proud of that team, actually, and we do look to bring people back on a phased return or in a different workplace quicker to support them to return to full-time employment. So I just wanted to let Councillor Wood know that, really, that we do actively have interventions in place to look to bring people back quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tracy. Preventative health has got to be the way forward, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Has to be. We've just got to help people get fitter and healthier in all senses. Okay, well, we've already had 45 minutes on this really interesting topic, but I think we probably need to move on. Recommendations. Well, so this report had been referred to us for consideration by Cabinet. We had a couple of comments, which I know, Laith, you've picked up on. Councillor Johnson has asked that the pie charts be tweaked a little bit. So that's one. And I think it might be worth, when we look at that report again, having a little bit of clarity when it comes to the average working days lost and the teams that we're looking at, just the size of the team, because that makes a huge difference, doesn't it? And Councillor Carroll commented, but sometimes if it's a very small team, that massive change can only be 1 or 2 people. And I think if we know the size of the team that we're talking about, I think that might help when we're looking at those changes.
Yeah. If I just comment on that, because I think the FT numbers are on that report. So I just tried it on the very first.
It does say that, does it? Okay.
So I think under the HR one, it says there's an FT of 40.
So it does say how many people. There we go.
45.97. But yeah, I just wondered whether we can actually state whether those 13 days lost affect by 1 staff, 2 staff. I'm just mindful that we don't know, and I've got to be careful.
I think we understand that.
Yeah.
But for that clarity.
Yeah. So the numbers are there. So I think
Yeah, and I think your last the last page, which is looking at the ages, isn't it, and the number of working days lost within the age group. Again, it looks like as you get older, you take more time off, but it might be that 75% of the workforce are in that age bracket. So it's again, it's possibly something to reflect on there too. That's great. Okay. Mark,
Chair,
have I confused you now? I probably have, haven't I?
no, just to
Sorry.
confirm, in terms of the comments, obviously the comments, if there was needed by the committee to go back to
Yeah.
cabinet, but at the moment they seem to be more comments in
Yeah.
relation to tweaks to the report that obviously
Yes.
Lathe and Tracy can do. So I just want to check if there are any comments specifically to go back to cabinet. If not, if committee and yourself are happy, just to note the report and then
Yeah.
have a recommendation
Yeah.
about those tweaks to the
Yeah.
report
I'm
that
happy with that.
Lathe and Tracy can deal with, because
Yeah.
they're not necessarily cabinet specific.
No, that's absolutely true. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Do we have a hand to move on that? Thank you, Councillor Hamilton, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Lovelock-Edwards. That's great. Thank you. Right, so let's move swiftly on to agenda item 5. Now, this is our closure of accounts, 22 to 23. Another reference from Cabinet from the 6th of July, and we have Matt to take us through this one. Thank you, Matt.
Evening, everyone. This is the first of 3 end-of-year financial reports. We're looking at revenue, capital and treasury this evening. The revenue report, we've tried to adapt this throughout the year, trying to make the numbers as transparent and as accessible as possible. We've been moving to is trying to give you a good overview in the executive summary part of the report, so it gives the full picture, a bit more detail in the body, and then we've put more detail on the individual service level in the appendices. So I hope people have found the report and helpful in being able to navigate around it. Fair to say 22-3 financial year has been quite a challenge. There's been a real wide range of pressures, but we have seen some positive movements at year end. And I've had fairly strong and consistent reporting throughout the year that's really good. So generally positive year-end position despite all those pressures. We've talked about a number of them throughout the year of these meetings. So we do have significant demand pressures in children, especially post-COVID. And also complexity and frequency of legal proceedings now, as well as the actual placement costs themselves. There have been additional pay costs associated with HGV drivers and the shortage of those drivers across Wales and the UK. We've got leisure contract costs, certainly some reduced footfall still after COVID, but really heavily impacted by the energy costs and inflation. State of our roads is also a challenge, given some of the winter weather we've had, and pothole and patching highway costs continue to be a challenge. School transport too, and some of the energy inflation costs that we've seen elsewhere have impacted there. Some of the pressures we reported earlier in the year have eased off a little bit though, so the pressure not quite as high as anticipated early in the year. There have been some areas that we've needed to intervene as well. There's been a real challenge commissioning sufficient social care providers in adult social care, and we've needed to step in there and put improved payments in place to help with recruitment of providers and retention of the existing ones. On the positive side, there have been some favourable variances. Additional investment income is one, and whilst increased bank rates are putting pressure on our communities, obviously we've seen the uptick in that because the surplus reserves and balances we invest obviously given us a better return than they have for probably the last dozen years. We did put some provision in place, some additional provision in place when we revised the budget at the third quarter for additional council tax income. That was of £1.5 million. That's not quite all come through, but that has been offset to some extent by underspend on our council tax reduction scheme, which is a bit of a surprise when you look at some of the pressures in the general economy. However, on the council tax take side, we'd expect some of that to come through in new year, as we've been doing a lot of work on recovery over the last couple of months. Generally across budgets, there's been additional pay cost pressures, but those have been offset many instances by vacant posts and other spends in service budgets. We've also benefited from what you might call a bit of a windfall, and that's a one-off adjustment to social services accounting, and that's in respect of client contributions and how we account for those. We'd expected that to be about £2 million, but that's come out at 4. And the reason for that is that we needed to take secured and unsecured debt into account. And when we've gone back and looked at our records, we typically receive pretty much or are able to cover 100% of the unsecured as well as the secured. So that's a one-off, and we had flagged that up early in the year. So the year-end position is an overall break-even position. There've been some transfers from reserve, some planned around the council fund, and that was 987. The housing revenue account reserve, a smaller than anticipated transfer, and that's been heralded in some of the capital programme monitoring we've done during the year. There's been a movement on school balances, and whilst planned, it's normally the case that all of that doesn't come through. So that's a slight area of concern for us. And then we've had £12.3 million now down from reserves to support the capital programme, and that's planned. So capital fund, council fund now stands £11.5 million, and that's in broad policy level. Housing revenue account down at £16 million. And once you take all of that into account, we've ended up with a small surplus of £1.89 million that we've been able to target on some known commitments and potential pressures that have been bubbling under, and those are set out in the body of the report as well. We've put 200k aside for education pressures and improvements, 850k to support additional learning needs in mainstream schools that will certainly help schools in balancing their budgets in 23-4. Some money towards neighbourhood services for dealing with dilapidations, money importantly for micro asphalt schemes to address the condition of roads, some money set aside for neighbourhood services reserve whilst we do some work, health and safety works in leisure centres, and some money aside in reshape and reserve to support children and young people, and then 120k to support some implementation of road safety schemes on the A48. So those are the main headlines, and naturally happy to take any questions you might have.
That's great. Thank you, Matt. Any questions? Any questions for Matt on the accounts? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much, Matt. I mean, I think the starting point is to congratulate you on completing your first year at the Vale of Glamorgan, and and the accounts that you've provided for us here. I want to touch on a couple of points, probably to ask you to sort of unpack some of the comments you've already alluded to in your introduction there. As you say, I mean, overall, and there's an awful lot of data within this report, and it's difficult, therefore, to sort of to analyse it in a meeting of this nature. I don't know whether it's worth considering, sort of, when as we. I know Governance and Audit saw the unaudited accounts the other day, but whether it's worth having a presentation for members, to go through this in a bit more detail, in future years. year-end revenue position was break even after net transfers from reserves of around £17 million. So the amount of our usable reserves has dropped from I think 127 million to around 110 million. However, obviously the the financial year is an abstract concept in some ways, and that follows last year where we were 24 million pounds up in terms of those usable reserves. So we're still 7 million, even though we spent 17 million pounds more than we had in. We are still 7 million up on where we were. So I'm looking, to understand, sort of some of those differences. So the schools reserve is obviously a major difference. So that's and some of this is confused by a reallocation of reserves within year, which makes direct comparisons difficult. But the school reserve obviously is a spend of £6.5 million. I'm looking to understand how much of that was simply money that was gifted to us by Welsh Government in Q4 of the previous year and has simply been spent in this year. How much of it is actually, I think you suggested some of it was planned, but given the the pressure that's on school budgets going into the the current financial year, it's understanding to what extent all of that was planned or not. I hope that makes sense. We just sort of unpack that. I want to, and obviously a lot of spend has come out of the capital, but not a lot from the housing revenue account. And the HRA is something that we we regularly refer to and assume or make assumptions regarding a great deal of spend, but we've got nearly, I think it's nearly still 17 million pounds or so within that. So there's £1 million spent, down from 17 million previously. But when you go into the detail, you see the capital expenditure from revenue account, Sarah, favourable variance £15 million, and so having that sort of on in Appendix 7 on page 52 or 55 or whatever it is, seems a little bit sort of out hidden away, if that makes sense. So it's understanding the amount of capital spend as opposed to money coming from HRA, which of course is money that's is ring fenced for for social housing. And I mean, it's explained that it wasn't possible to spend the initial budget due to delays in procurement, staff turnover, etc. But £50 million obviously is quite a difference within that. So although there's an awful lot of other questions, because there's so much that goes, we've adverse variance here, favourable variance here. If you could just unpack those big ticket spending issues, then I'd be grateful for that, Matt. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So
the schools is a very complicated position. I think everyone would probably agree with that. What we've seen, and there's an appendix setting out what the school balance have been over the last 8 to 10 years. What we did see is that over a period of time they were gradually coming down £3-4 million in total, just a couple of years ago, and then during the pandemic, where there was extra resource for school, we've seen them grow to the level they were at the 31st of March last year, in excess of £12 million. The budgets that we'd had in from schools and approved for this financial year, there were planned reductions in reserves of £6 million. But what previous experience has been is that schools typically don't run the balances down to the level of which they plan, and they come out at year end better than that. So in a normal year, we wouldn't have expected to see the full £6 million drawn down as per plan. But that has come through, and that will have been for a large range of factors. Certainly one of them will have been around the pressures in meeting the cost of the teachers' pay award from September 2022. And certainly whilst the authorities put more money into to school balances, schools have understandably been feeling quite a large amount of financial pressure. So that's the schools, and it is, when you look at it across over 50 schools, there's a slightly different story for every school. They're not all the same. So I'm conscious that's a fairly broad generalisation, but that is the general position we have. The HRA, Possibly we could have been flagging up or dealing a bit more comprehensively with the potential movement on that HRA reserve during the course of the year, and joining up the reporting that we were doing in the capital programme across the revenue a little bit more strongly. A lot of the HRA balances have been built up to support the capital programme. And as we were working during the first couple of the quarters of the financial year and rescheduling the capital programme, it was fairly expected that we wouldn't be running down HRA balances to the level that they were expected. We've obviously rescheduled a lot of the expenditure into 23-24 financially in the capital programme. So expectation is that those reserves that are now £16.5 million will come down in the new financial year.
Thank you.
If I could just come back a moment quickly, Chair. I mean, so
Yeah, of course.
I think what I'm hearing from that school's perspective was that although there'd been planned expenditure, actually it seems that there's additional pressures within that are not one-off costs, but will have to be absorbed going forward. Is that what I'm hearing there? The other question I think that's just to clarify for me is there's a line here in the exec summary: the level of usable reserves reduced in year by less than projected. I'm just wondering, I don't know if you've got the figures in front of you, Matt, but just if you could just remind us what was anticipated to be, so that we can understand how that's different to the final outcome.
That one, I apologies, but I don't have that.
Yeah, I was looking at it because I can't see it in here. I was just wondering if you had it, because it says that as a statement, and I was just wondering whether there's a small amount less or or some more substantial amounts, just because I'm trying to get a wider picture for myself, if nothing else, because these have been such large variations in spending as a result of the pandemic, and often fairly late Q4 grants that then inflate the amounts at year end because they haven't been spent, but therefore understanding that smoothing process between one year and the next, I'm still finding quite challenging within all of the the data that comes in different directions, in terms of because the favourable and adverse variances this might be at this point in time, but if you've been given a lot of money in Q4 that's not going to be spent until Q1 next year, then it's already allocated and it's not actually there in reality as an amount that you'll be looking to spend.
Yeah, and on the revenue side, there's been far less than that than we've had in previous years. But when I come to talk about the capital programme in a moment, we'll talk about that, and that's given us some challenges at year end where we've had to displace capital grants or planned capital funding with capital grants. And so I'll come to that. The schools, there will be some potential ongoing pressures. We've recognised in budget setting the full cost of the award from September 22, but of course we've not been able to fund all of that, and there's been an efficiency target put on schools. So we've recognised that all the costs that are coming through in terms of pay awards, but not as a council be able to fund all of that, and there is an efficiency target on schools in 23-4.
Thank you. Anybody else like to ask Matt questions on the closure of accounts document? No? Okay, that's great. Oh, hang on, Councillor Carroll.
Yeah, it was just a quick one to clarify.
Yeah, of
the
course.
favourable variance of £1.89 million that's sort of listed as a standalone, if that makes sense. So that was a favourable variance across the whole revenue budget, was it?
Yeah.
So it was in effect a profit on what you had planned.
I'd go with your previous narrative. It's a positive variance across the whole accounts. I wouldn't describe it as a profit. Some of the upsides that I talked about in introducing the report have certainly contributed to that. So the accounting change in social care, that was £4 million in total. 2 of it has been used to support pressures, but 2 of it has certainly contributed to the overall picture. But there's so many, at the end of the year, there's so many minor variations when you add them all.
Yeah, no. I was just curious. You were up 1.89 million though, is what?
Yes,
that did happen. Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we have another hand. Yes, Councillor Goodjohn, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, well, less of a question, more of a comment, really, just to say thank you to the team. And it's fantastic to have seen. I saw Tom and the corporate performance team were engaging with young people at the School Council Network meeting recently, which I attended. It was lovely to see them talking about the funding that is going to be available because of this favourable variance that are going to be given to children and young people, and some ideas floated around by the young people as to what would be most effective to assist them. And a lot of the ideas were extremely conscientious, thinking about the environment, thinking about what would be most helpful for them and their families in general. So it was a really positive experience to see. And that, along with the pressures around ALN that the schools are facing at the moment, is a huge issue, and actually one of our top issues and priorities on the risk register as well, which we saw at Governance and Audit only on Monday. So some fantastic work that has been done with this favourable variance, which is a terminology which is, corporate speak for us, but it can really help people's lives in the future because of good financial management and good support from the investment team and fantastic work from finance in general. So I must say congratulations and good work.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Yes, it's certainly been choppy seas that you've had to steer the ship through, Matt. So yes, you can certainly be congratulated for that. Anybody else like to ask any questions on the closure of accounts? No? Okay. That's brilliant. So I think the recommendations were basically that this was a reference from Cabinet and that they wanted us to review the end of year position, and we've done that. So I think we can just move from this one, if I can have a hand.
Just to check, Chair, just the committee and yourself are happy to note the report then, is that correct?
Yeah, and we're noting it.
Okay.
Review and noted. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. And can I have a seconder? That's great. Thank you. I can't see who that hand was. Councillor Hamilton. That's great. Thank you. Okay, let's swiftly move on to agenda item 6, which is the capital closure of accounts from 2022 to 23. This is another reference from Cabinet from the 6th of July, and it's back to Matt. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is the second of the 3 year-end reports and outlines the capital outturn for 22-3. I'm glad to say this, been less movement at year end than we've seen in some of the quarterly reporting that I've presented here over the last year. However, there are some schemes totaling £2 million that we've been required to add into the programme late in the year. Body of the report. So our adjusted programme at year end is £82.5 million, and expenditure against that of £80.8 million. So despite all the challenges that we've been setting out during the year around cost increases, shortage of resource, need to renegotiate and retender, it is pleasant to be able to note actually that the outturn is at £80.8 million, and actually 98% of the adjusted programme has been delivered. Quite a bit chippy on our part, and through you as well, but a lot of dedication and commitment from our officers in the services taking these schemes forward. So at year end, we have net slippage of 715k that's been required to be approved by emergency powers, and that's reported in. The full detail of the programme on a scheme by scheme basis is set out in Appendix 2. Just a couple of things to bring to attention, I guess. One is the breakdown of the funding is set out in the body of the report, and capital expenditure in the year has been sufficient to cover the full allocation of the supported borrowing that we have from Welsh Government, so that's positive. £3.2 million of the general capital grant has been spent during 22-23. In some instances, we had schemes that were originally planned to be financed from general capital finance funding, and those schemes have been where they've underspent, outturn. Other schemes planned to be funded from capital receipts, revenue contribution or capital reserves have been substituted in their place. That's helps with the overall funding of the programme. It does give us quite a headache in terms of the accounting year end, and it's quite a job for us. But certainly that has happened, as I was just answering Councillor Johnson's question earlier, in capital similar to previous years, but perhaps not at the same level. So perhaps not the same challenges, but nonetheless a little bit of substitution required at year end. Further funding streams were utilised, including £46 million of Welsh Government grant in total, and other grant income and Section 106. And additionally, reading across into revenue, £23.3 million was drawn down from reserves or funded through a revenue contribution into capital. So quite a bit of interplay between capital and revenue here. Limited number of capital receipts were received in the year, £2.5 million, but they've all contributed. And the balance on capital receipts going forward is a little bit over 10 million, so £10.6 million going forward. I think the other pleasurable thing about the report, given all the conversations we've had about slippage during the year, is that at year end we're very much able to focus on what's been delivered with that £80 million, and some really impressive schemes, and we've included some photographs of those in the body of the report. We've talked quite a bit about the schools programme in the year, so perhaps highlighting under social services the completion of the accessible bungalow with smart technology, a lot of facilities in that bungalow, and really intelligent layouts and accessibility. We've got the resource recovery facility now operational, which is a really big plus. And I think when you do see the photo, it's much better than me trying to explain that in a paragraph of text. Quite a significant undertaking. And under the housing improvement plan, and obviously there's much more to come through in the HRA development plan, given some of the slippage we've had earlier in the year. There's the scheme of 23 new homes for social rent at Lonavell Wint off Hayes Road in Barry. So quite a number of successes in the programme to report at year end. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Yes, definitely a very positive report, and I like the pictures too. I think it does help to illustrate the work that's been undertaken. Councillor Franks, would you like to ask some more questions of Matt?
Yes, please. Thank you, Matt, for that report. I appreciate the information you've given us, but I'd like to seek the views of cabinet members who are present on a number of points. It's said that, and I'm afraid my screen has just failed me, as it always does. We only had 1.6 million of variance, in other words, underspend. But the reality is that 2,800,000 was additionally spent by two departments. So if you strip that out, the focus is, I'm afraid, on environment, where there's £3.6 million underspend. Now that's a significant number, when you see what other departments have done. So I have a series of questions, Chair, and with your permission, I'll go through each point in a block. Shall I?
See how many you've got. Let's just take it one at a time. Let's see.
What would you like?
Start with the first one.
All right. Okay. There's 1.6 million for the local transport fund underspent. I wonder if the cabinet member could detail what's the reason for that, and what opportunities have we lost last financial year?
I'm not sure if have we got the cabinet member for transport? I don't think we do on this particular meeting.
Okay.
So I don't know, Matt, do we know what the underspend is for the local transport fund?
I don't have that readily to hand. I might have to get back to Councillor Franks. It might be later in the report. It might be in the body of the report, but it's quite difficult to go through it, to scan through it now.
Yeah.
Yes, I appreciate that.
I'll have to get it on my whole screen sort of thing.
I had the same problem, so I sympathise with you.
Yeah.
Okay, to continue then, there's 130.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, Councillor Franks. I think Councillor Burnett has her hand up. I don't know if she wants to come in on this point or not.
Hang on, thanks. I wouldn't mind doing so. I think going on from what was said in the previous report actually is that we're looking at figures at a point in time. And as I say advisedly, every time we're looking at capital in relation to schools, quite a lot of asset renewal work in schools is carried out in school holidays, and where Easter is can actually have quite an impact in terms of whether something happens in one year or the other. I'm not sure of the details of the local transport fund, but what I would point you to is the transport hub by the dock office, and actually that was completed just in the new year. So it's quite possible that money slipped over into the new year. That is now complete. It'll be a similar picture with a lot of the work. I've just signed an EP in terms of a lot of the work that will be going on in our schools this summer holidays. And we're normally talking easily in sort of millions in terms of boiler renewals and roof renewals and everything else that goes on in our schools. So a lot depends on when that work is phased. And so I would imagine we'll get the details on that, but I would imagine that it's because our accounts are done up to the end of the financial year, and it's what happens either side of that.
I'm grateful, Councillor. Of course, I'm not going to be focusing on education, but I take your point. The next one is 136,000 for highway improvements. Now that is disappointing considering the amount of requests there are for highway improvements, and I wonder if the leader can indicate what the issue was there.
We'll have to get back to you. I mean, 136,000 is not a huge amount in terms of the level of highway improvements that we do. So it's probably best if we go back to the highways team to look at those specifics on there.
All right, thank you. A substantial sum, 5.6.
I've just come in on that one as well, and just to some of this is on pages 16 and 17 of the appendix. That 136k is worth noting that is against a 1.9 million pound scheme, and on your earlier one, the 1.6 million pound, that's on page 16 of the report, but it doesn't answer your question. So we'll very definitely have to get back to you on that one and the reason for the slippage and the timing of the rescheduling of those works.
Thank you, Mac. I did try hard to find a narrative relating to my questions, but I'm grateful for your advice. The substantial one it's £565,000 for Atlantic, the Atlantic estate. I wonder why there was such a huge amount there, apparently unspent.
I suspect we're going to have to get back to you on that one as well. What page of the appendix?
It's in the appendix, Matt, and the appendix isn't numbered. It would help me.
It's on page 21 of the report. I'm only saying that because at least the PDF's telling me what number page it is. That's for the slippage for the continuation of the scheme. So
Yeah,
for both of those, it is around timing, and the fact that 31st of March is something of an artificial point in the year. So on both of those, we'll get back to you and give you an update on when they're
okay.
complete.
I appreciate that, but when we're dealing with the annual accounts, we deal with the annual accounts. So I accept that. There's another huge sum for fleet management, £424,000 unspent. That seems again curious that there's such a huge amount that's outstanding. You know, there's not construction there. There's not issues with planning permission or the like. Just buying a vehicle.
Which page is that on?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going from the screen that doesn't give a page, and then I got a cross-reference on the left-hand side, which is quite a struggle. It might be an idea to actually paginate in future. I think we're looking at something like 20 and 21.
Because it could either be vehicles that are already...
I beg your pardon, it's 23, sorry, page 23.
So that's the vehicle replacement programme.
That's it.
And block on page 23, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that just says slippage requested. I mean, it's basically the vehicles aren't here yet, and anybody that's ordered a vehicle would know how long it takes to get them. So yeah, it'll be interesting to know when they arrive. But you know, you put money aside, you put them into the capital programme to allocate the money, but it doesn't. Fortunately, you don't pay for them until they come.
No, that's a good point. I'm grateful for that. So there are substantial sums, and I've got to say I'm a bit disappointed that we haven't fulfilled the budget, but I look forward to comments in the fullness of time. And on I know we're talking about 22, 23, but the report actually does highlight matters in the year 23, 24, which is good to my mind. On page 35, resources, there's reference to a number of schemes, most of which have not commenced according to the spend. Decarbonisation scheme, Penarth Learning, sorry, Pennegarth, Cogan, that type of thing. Is there any progress on these matters?
We'll be reporting on those to Cabinet in September, so that we've just finished the first quarter, and with the process of pulling the monitoring reports together. So that will come to Cabinet first week of September, and the very next cycle of scrutiny meetings for you to consider.
Thank you very much. I look forward to that. Thank you, Chair.
I'm afraid we can't hear you, Chair.
Yeah, mute the chair. Yeah, your sound isn't coming on for some reason, Chair. I'm not sure what's happened with your headphones or.
How's that?
Yes, yes, I can hear you now, Chair.
I don't quite know what happened there. I do apologise. It just needed me to take it out and put it, put it in again. Sorry. Councillor Goodjohn, please go ahead.
Yeah, can I just start by reminding fellow councillors that either questions can be submitted by writing before the committee meeting and then follow-up questions at the committee meeting, or you can request that particular officers be in presence. There are plenty of options available, so we don't have to. I don't expect, and I would hope no one else does either, our finance officer or the leader of the council, to know the specific details of every single one of this enormous list of capital projects and why they may or not be slipped, but whatever. I might also remind everyone that £2.9 million of overspend at a time that the inflation rate is 9%, 8%, 7% at the lowest rate now is incredible for a scheme that has £80 million of investment into the local economy, into local services, into local infrastructure. It's an enormous scheme and very ambitious as well. I have to now actually apologise because I casted doubt in quarter three if it was going to be possible for all of this to be done with the slippage that had been taken in quarter three. But especially schemes such as the new build is incredible. Also, if I just reach very quickly on the learning and skills, Pencoitra is being completed. I mean, we have Pencoitra, Barry Waterfront, Cowbridge Primary, St Nicholas. These are enormous schemes that have been completed, and also, of course, not to forget to mention the free school meals grant as well, which has all been completed. Which I'll be honest, I didn't know if it would be fully completed in quarter three. So I have to say a huge well done to the whole team across the council that this is been done. It's an enormous effort and extremely ambitious from the get-go, and the slippage has been a bit, but it hasn't been anywhere near as much as it could have been considering the market circumstances, the market volatility, and it's extremely impressive. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, and absolutely. And it is quite true that the accounts might go from March, from April to March, but our projects continue to go. So you are not going to have everything matching up, are you? That is very true. Councillor Burnett, would you like to come in at this point?
If there's
Thank
nobody
you.
else that wants to come in, that would be super, Chair. I just wanted to continue in terms of what Councillor Goodjohn was saying. I'm in a very fortunate position that the Chief Executive and I have been going off visiting schemes in the last couple of weeks, and the other day I went to the resource recovery facility for the third time. It remains an absolute joy, and the outcomes from it in terms of our recycling levels are superb. On the same day, I went to Llanera Ysgol, which is a new over 50s development of flats where the people will be moving in by the end of this month. Superb, St Cyrus Road, Penarth. I then went to Hayswood, or we then went to Hayswood Road, to the other development there, and I know Councillor Franks was really interested in that. When the actual contractor went through, unfortunately, last year, and we took the decision. I mean, we could have just said, right, well, we'll go back out to tender, 6 months or so delay. So local subcontractors that were working on the scheme could have lost their money, could have been, left adrift, but we took it on ourselves, and with the support of some project managers, that scheme is back on track. It's being delivered in a phased zone, so we're looking for the first people to move in this autumn and have it completely occupied by next spring. And the work rate is phenomenal. The quality of the properties that are being developed, again, phenomenal. People have seen St Barrack delivered. Okay, it wasn't, we worked with the consortium and were able to chivvy them along to actually get it delivered. But over the summer, 2 more schools, as you've mentioned, Cowbridge and Derry Newydd, will be completed, ready to open in September. And on site is St Nicholas, and that is on target and on budget to open in Easter next year. So I have to actually say a huge hats off to the teams that have been working on this, to our finance teams that have been so supportive in helping to manage the budgets on this. I think that the additional table that's been put into the reports to show where the slippage is, show how it's happening, and allows us to be more transparent and more clear about what's happening in our projects has been a major step forward. So thank you to Matt in terms of our reports being more accessible. But huge thank you to all our teams, whether that be housing or property or whatever, that have been working on these schemes and have been delivering them in what's been really, really difficult circumstances in the last year.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett, and that's a really good story, a good success story with Hazelwood, that out of a company going through, we were still able to save those jobs for the subcontractors, and I believe still deliver on time. So that is a great success. Thank you. Does anybody else want to ask any more questions? I don't think we've got any more hands. So that's brilliant. Thank you ever so much, everybody. So I think the recommendations again from this one were that committee reviewed the end of year position, as we did with the previous one, and note the contents. And I think we've done that, and we've had a good, robust debate. So can we have a hand to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Drake, and thank you, Councillor Hanks, for seconding that one. That's smashing. So let's move swiftly on to the last of our financial reports. This is the Treasury Management Report from 2022-23, another reference from Cabinet on the 6th of July. And it's back to Matt. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. So Treasury, a fairly well regulated area of the council's activities, and we have to report on the outturn under actually under the Local Government Act 2003, but it also needs to meet a number of other regulatory requirements and codes of practice, such as the Treasury Management Code of Practice, SIP for Prudential Code for Capital Finance, and Welsh Government guidance and regulation as well. So a very heavily regulated area. We do have to report at year end, and certainly into the new year, we're looking at reporting on a more regular basis to Cabinet on this, quarterly ideally. The report covers 3 broad areas: borrowing, investing, and also our prudential indicators, the ones that ensure that we're keep the money safe for the council. So we undertake capital expenditure on long-term assets, and they're typically financed through capital revenue resources, capital receipts, capital grants, etc., or they give rise to a borrowing need, and that underlying borrowing need is termed capital financing requirement. So during 22-23, and this runs across into revenue a bit as well, we maintained an under-borrowed position, and that means that the capital financing requirement wasn't fully funded through external loan debt, but it was supported through cash supporting the council's reserves, balances, and cash flow in the interim. As a consequence, our borrowing requirement actually reduced in 22-23 from the previous year, given a capital financing requirement of £195.5 million, and that's detailed at the bottom of page 10. I do make an apology actually, because we do normally number all our tables in our reports, and it certainly makes it easier navigating your way around them and presenting them, presenting the reports actually. So I'll make some references to page numbers when I talk through this now. We did, the council did undertake some new borrowing through the Public Works Loan Board, just £3 million, a relatively small sum of money, and that was to part finance some maturing debt. PWLB is the main lender to local government, and that accounts for about 2/3 of all the authority's debt. The portfolio at the 31st of March, with the interest rates payable, is detailed on the top of page 2 of the report, and later in the report, on page 13 actually, there's more detail, and it shows the movement between the 2 years as well. Our total external debt at 31st of March is now £148.5 million. So those are the headlines on the borrowing side of things. Investing, and I did touch on this when introducing the revenue outturn, interest rates, we've seen them rising for the first time in 10-12 years through the Bank of England's intervention on the inflationary pressures in the economy. That's meant that there has been greater investment return for the council. And Appendix 1 provides details of movements in the interest rate forecasts during the year. That's quite a detailed appendix. The upward movement in interest rates has actually given us some challenge because we've had to be significantly more proactive in our investment activity for the first time in probably a decade. And that's emphasised the need for detailed working knowledge of cash flow positions. And it's good to note that the team are well on top of that. As I said, the rates have increased. The portfolio is shown on page 16 of the report, and at 31st of March there was about just short of £94 million out for investment. There are a range of potential indicators in the report. I think what we will do in terms of reporting in future is pull them all together in one section of the report as a summary. They're in 7 or 8 different paragraphs of the report at the moment, but I would obviously naturally like to report that all the Treasury amount of activity undertaken during the financial year has complied with the limits laid out in our strategy and with the prudential indicators that we agreed when the Treasury strategy was agreed back in March 2022. So that's all I was going to say as introduction to this last financial report this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Matt. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much for that, Matt. Got a couple of questions on sort of both sides of the balance sheet, as it were. As you say, this is the most volatile that some of this has been since, probably before I was a councillor, probably back since, the recession in 2008-9, when things changed. And I remember, people investing in Icelandic banks with 15% interest rates and things like that, which was as foolhardy now as it was at the time. But I see that we have an interest rate of we made around £1.7 million, I think it suggests here, in terms of the year just gone. I'm just interested in sort of a bit unpacking of the narrative around sort of how much we are shopping around for better deals and what that looks like in terms of the amount of additional money coming in, and therefore the flip side of that being our maturing debt and the likelihood of additional costs surrounding that, bearing in mind obviously that some of our maturing debt was presumably taken out 20 or 30 years ago at higher percentage rates even than where we are now. So I just appreciate a bit of further context on sort of on the shifting sands there, because obviously they're moving fairly quickly, and I see that we've obviously withdrawn from some takes. Thanks.
Yeah, So on the investments, and that is a really good question, because the table that's in paragraph 2.37 sets out where the 94 million pounds is currently or was invested at year end, and in the context of a Bank of England base rate of 5%, they don't feel great rates, do they? But what we have seen during the course of the year is some of those rates ticking up and improving, and I'd expect that to happen during the first quarter and into the rest of this new financial year. You did helpfully reference the Icelandic banks, and the behaviour of some local authorities at that time did give rise to codes of practice. And that really changed the balance of our investment behaviour as a sector. And number one now is making sure that you have your money returned before you consider yield and return. That notwithstanding that, we still do need to, whilst maintaining low risk, make sure that we do get the best returns we can. And we are very well advised by our external advisors on that, and meeting regularly with them to make sure that we place our money in the best places. So that's something we are attending to. And your comments about borrowing, yes, what we've experienced in the last couple of years, where we've been refinancing historical debt, that as we've been doing that, we've actually been finding our average cost of borrowing coming down. We are in very much different circumstances now. We're taking advice on that. The advice certainly earlier in the year would certainly, even the start of this calendar year, was the expectation that rates were going to come down, and that we would probably borrow short term and then refinance in the next couple of years when rates were back down. But that's certainly something we're going to have to take some more advice on. I think the Bank of England base rate at 5% now has risen more quickly and to a higher level than anticipated. Obviously, the inflation news we've had today is a bit better than we've expected for the first time after inflation stalled last month at 8.7%. So some of the talk now, just in the last couple of days, has been that possibly the next interest rate rise will be a bit more measured than the 0.5% we saw last month, so perhaps just 0.25%, and also talk that it may well peak at 5.5%, whereas just just a month ago, people were talking, well, could be going over 6%. So something we're very much aware of, we can continually take advice on.
Thanks very much for that, Matt. Obviously, it's there's a lot of volatility sort of within this compared to where we've been in the last sort of 10 years or so. If I could just Chair, beg indulgence and ask a sort of process question around the capital financing requirements, because in over many years we've used internal borrowing for that capital financing, and that means we end up, it feels to me, coming from as a scrutiny perspective, you look at the budget compared to the actual figures, because we are borrowing internally rather than borrowing on the markets. I'm just wondering, sort of whether it feels appropriate to be saying this is how we're borrowing compared to using our internal borrowing, and what the effect of the current strategy is going to be, because we say that we have a sort of a gross borrowing position was projected to be 198 million, but actually it's only 148 million because we are because we're internally borrowing. Is it appropriate, fair to be putting that budget position in if that's not how we're actually going to be behaving as a council? When's that decision made that we'll be continuing the internal borrowing position rather than suggesting that we're going to be borrowing a lot externally?
Yeah,
does that make sense?
Yeah. And some of that decision effectively is taken when we agree the treasury strategy at the start of the year, but given the volatility that we are experiencing, that's going to be something we're going to have to review as we go through the new financial year, whether we need to change or amend or slightly tweak that approach. But some of the reason that the borrowing was down this year isn't just because we've entirely internally borrowed it, is because of the overall spend on the capital programme due to the slippage we had in those first couple of quarters was at a lower level than when we set the strategy back in March 22.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's following on from Councillor Johnston's questions on the interest rates. Just a question to ask the variety of different scenarios that the authority has modelled. The only reason I ask that is because obviously you touched on the fact that rates have risen at a rate higher than expected, but I look at the data tables and the last projection from the 27th of March 2023. They're projecting there that the base rate will have gone back to 2.5% by September 2025. Now, just to put that in perspective, if you look at the prediction they were making at the start of last year, they were expecting right now us to be at 1.25%, and obviously we're at 5%. So the question really is, it appears as though it's come as a surprise, the amount of investment income that you've had to reinvest, so to speak. I mean, the report talks of challenges, etc. And I think that phrase is used several times. So the question really is, has modelling been done on a variety of different scenarios when it comes to the base rate so that the authority is placed to respond accordingly to that, so that you're not caught short?
So when we meet with our Treasury advisors, we'll talk about different scenarios and what's likely to be happening in the market and how we'd operate in those circumstances. So those discussions take place. We don't, as such, write it all down and put a paper around it. Maybe given the volatility that we're experiencing now, that might be something we change our approach to. But certainly part of the driver for bringing quarterly reports here is that volatility and the need to give it more attention. But whereas some of our more, in the last couple of years when we've met with our Treasury advisors, it's been with a very flat picture and it's as steady as you go. Those conversations are very much changed and are looking at the different scenarios that that we've been discussing. It's fair to say that the tables in the appendix are in part reassuring when you look at the where the interest rates have been and that they're up at 5.5%. The market commentators are still saying that they are going to come down over the next couple of years.
The only thing I would say on that is most market commentators weren't expecting them to be at 5%. Right now, bar one or two. So no, that's I just think we need to be mindful of the fact that if you look historically, the ultra low rates that we had following the crash up until last year, they were the anomaly. They weren't normal. And don't get me wrong, no projection is suggesting you're going to go back to virtually zero or sub 1%. But even so, 2.5 is relatively low when you look at other rates that we've had in the past. And I wouldn't say it's a given that that's going to happen.
Yeah. And it is, I think, when we look back to the banking crisis and when we saw the interest rates come down, the local authority I was working with at that time, we'd done some debt rescheduling. I mean, rates to stay where they were for about 18 months for the payback, and
15 years later.
And it's become a bit of a new normal, isn't it? So the impact of the war in Ukraine, difficult to ever predict, but it's had an enormous impact on interest rates.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Yes, these are not normal times, are they? Although maybe this is now the new normal. I don't know. That's great. So anybody else want any more questions asked of Matt? No? Okay. That's wonderful. Thank you. So again, that was another reference from Cabinet, and it was simply a recommendation to review this report before it can be referred to full council for approval next week. So can we note that we have reviewed it? Can I have a hand to move on that, please? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Drake. That's wonderful. Thank you, Matt, for your patience and your presence today.
Thank you very much.
Much appreciated, and carry on the good work. Thank you ever so much.
Yeah.
So we now move on to another reference from Cabinet. I'm just wondering how committee feels. Does anybody want a comfort break for 5 minutes, or are we okay to press on ahead? Raise a hand if you would like a comfort break. Okay, I see no hands, so we're going to go forward. Thank you ever so much. So agenda item 8 is the draft digital strategy. This is a reference from Cabinet on the 6th of July. And we have Tom to take us through. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. Good evening, committee. So yes, this is a reference of the Council's draft digital strategy, which has been brought to you this evening as part of the consultation process. So I'll give you just a brief overview of the work that has been underway to get us to the point that we're at now. So the previous digital strategy ran from 2017 to 2020. Obviously, during the pandemic, a huge emphasis was placed on digitising the way of working, including home working, as we've discussed this evening, and also adopting new ways of working to support our residents whilst in-person services were largely suspended. In the Appendix A to the reference this evening, Chair, that's the draft of the digital strategy. The draft itself contains some information on the strategic context for the work, so it makes connections with the previous digital strategy and developments of recent years, notably the digital maturity assessment that was undertaken on the Council in 2021. It reflects the work that has been underway on the previous digital strategy, the experience of the pandemic, and also how we look to link this work with the overall wellbeing objectives that are outlined in the corporate plan. So the strategy itself has been developed in partnership. We've worked with the Society for Innovation, Technology and Modernisation, known as SOCOTIM, who are public sector experts, and we've brought over 100 colleagues together from across the organisation in a series of workshops and discussions to help shape this new digital vision, strategic objectives, and importantly, a roadmap to deliver them. So it's taken into consideration our organisational values in order to shape a vision and a set of commitments in this space, and has made some links with some of the other items that your committee's been discussing this evening, certainly in terms of finance, people, and our corporate assets, as well as public participation strategies. It's intentionally not a technical IT document, it's more about a future way of working for the organisation, and that's why it sets out a vision of transforming our digital culture. And the strategy itself is based around 4 themes, each of which have 2 very clear commitments associated with each of them. So the first being community and involvement. That links with the Council's public participation strategy. It focuses around how we involve our residents in designing services, enhancing the self-service opportunities available to them, as well as ensuring that digital exclusion is minimised. The second of the themes is around organisation and process. So that's making sure that there are robust governance arrangements in place, that people are encouraged to share their ideas about digital, and that relevant standards are adopted and opportunities for automation are looked at. The third of the 4 themes focuses around digital people and skills. So this links back with the item that you had on a previous agenda around the people strategy, and focuses specifically on supporting the confidence and ability of council colleagues in the use of technology, and how we communicate and share the strategy and the work that is undertaken as part of it. And then finally, the fourth of the themes is around data and insight. So this looks at how we focus on a consistent approach to how we manage, store and use data, and obviously do that in an effective and secure way. So associated with each of those commitments is a series of actions that will be taken in 3 time horizons. The first focusing in on 1 year activities, then in the 2 to 3 year space, and then finally within the 5 year time horizon. It also sets out a series of indicators in terms of how the performance will be monitored, as well as setting out as well a series of success factors. So what we would look to achieve if we're successful in its delivery. So it's been brought together, as I say, as part of a really collaborative approach. I was very, very keen that we involved as many of our colleagues as we possibly could in developing the draft. And we're now at a stage where we're going to be consulting on it, and that consultation will launch in the next couple of weeks and run through until September. We'll be inviting feedback from residents and council service users, both online and also accepting feedback over the phone. We'll be inviting feedback from all council colleagues as well. Obviously, we're bringing it to yourselves this evening as part of that consultation, as well as sharing it with the Public Services Board partners. And we're also discussing with the Equalities Consultative Forum, the Council Staff Diversity Networks and the Council's Member Champions Network for comment as part of that process. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour through the draft as it is.
Thank you, Tom. Do we have any questions on this draft strategy? Councillor Carroll.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Tom, for the presentation. Sorry, my camera doesn't appear to have. I think you've got me now. Yeah, thank you, Tom, for the presentation. I must say, having read the document, I did think it was a little unambitious, to be honest with you. I accept what you say about it not being a technical document, and that's not what you're trying to achieve. But if I look at some of the things that have been sort of presented as being quite innovative, they're things that I would consider to be quite standard, things like web analytics, social media analytics. These are things that have been around for some time, and I appreciate that perhaps there are newer tools available now than there were 3 or 4 years ago, but this isn't something groundbreaking. The other thing that I was disappointed about, and it would be something to look at, is throughout the whole document, artificial intelligence is mentioned just once, and it's sort of quite a vague statement. We'll identify potential technologies that may support the transformation of services, including the potential use of AI. Given how quickly that technology is moving and the developments that have taken place, I think it would be beneficial to make that, if not front and centre, certainly give it a far more prominent role in the strategy than perhaps we have to date. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. And in terms of the social media analytics, absolutely, they are really key things that as an organisation we look at when we're measuring our digital success. Certainly happy to look at the prominence in terms of artificial intelligence. We do talk about automation as well throughout the strategy, and the way that we can use this technology to support process efficiency and improvements to services. But I do take the point that perhaps it could be a little bit more prominent in terms of its referencing, so that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Anybody else got any comments on? Thank you, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Tom. I mean, it's interesting in sort of the challenge of being an easily readable document, compared with sort of the challenge of being ambitious, and I suppose it's interesting to see, without being an expert myself, sort of what other public sector organisations are doing and what other comparable organisations might be doing that would actually be both ambitious and substantially different from where we've already reached. The question I had was really sort of based on some of the advanced reading for a later item, which is sort of there's discussions around KPIs here about user traffic, etc. But one of the issues that's being raised in a later item in tonight's agenda is about a decision to reduce the number of posts on our existing social media, which has therefore led to a reduction in broader traffic, not necessarily single user traffic, but in fewer people, sort of having impressions of, Facebook or Twitter posts. And I'm just wondering kind of, where that's sort of, within a document that doesn't necessarily set targets, but sets, quite broad, themes and approaches, where does actual decision making, sort of sit and exist? Who decides that our digital strategy is to post fewer, and does that mean have greater impact with each individual post? And how is that, sort of I'm sure you've heard this from me a lot, Tom, over the last couple of years. There's lots of very nice words in here that are very difficult to disagree with because you wouldn't do the opposite. So it's one of those documents where I've nothing particularly to disagree with. I'm just not sure necessarily how this is actually implemented, from this stage, if that makes sense, Tom.
Yeah, absolutely.
And similarly, therefore, that there's the challenge of responding to a consultation where I don't necessarily see where this, where there's nothing I particularly disagree with, but that doesn't tell me anything more than, is this any different to any other organisation's digital strategy?
I think I can try and answer a few of the threads in that question, if I may. And in terms of, is it different from other organisations' digital strategies? Some of the bones are very similar, because obviously we provide the same services as lots of local authorities do. I would suggest this is probably a more cultural document than some other local authorities. We've spent a long time trying to balance the development of the organisation to embrace the ability for digital to support the way that we work with, as Councillor Carroll was giving the example of things like artificial intelligence and some of the sort of tools and actual technology. So it's trying to balance those things, and that was one of the reasons that I was very keen that we worked with Scrutiny to bring their experience from elsewhere in order to challenge us a little bit. In terms of the specific targets and KPIs, we would see those coming through your reports around service planning when we will set those specific targets. And you're absolutely right, Councillor Carroll, the strategy in terms of social media to reduce the individual number of posts is very much in order to look at enhancing the reach and the impact that we have when we are posting. So Twitter, for example, lots of very strange things are going on in terms of Twitter and the way that the algorithms are working on that particular platform at the moment. So with that one, we're taking a different approach. But certainly in terms of Facebook, what we do see is there's a need for fewer posts, but with content that people find to be most engaging, presented in a way that they want to engage with, and then we will see greater reach as a result. So it is a slightly changing landscape on that front, but certainly what we do on a daily basis is monitor those social feeds to understand what is performing well and tweaking those things to make sure that we do the best job to reach as many people as we can do. I hope that sort of answers it.
That answers as far as I think we can go with with a culture-based document. One quick comment on that is there is a reference that's about ensuring all areas of the website are accessible, easy to use, and available in Welsh and English. And I will make a sort of a request here that that there is Welsh language user experience testing done as we go forward to ensure that it operates. It's because what tends to happen is that we end up with carbon copies of things, and they might actually be different in terms of the culture and the aims, and be interested to see sort of what work we do going forward and how that reflects then in in what we have as an offer.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Burnett. would you like to come in?
If I could, Chair, if there's nobody else waiting. As a cabinet member responsible, I think what I would like to add in for committee is we're looking at 4 themes here. And I know that, on occasions when we first talk about digital, that digital can be scary for people. And so people will say, well, what if I don't want to do everything on a computer? Whatever. And we totally reassure people that actually we will always be inclusive of everyone, but a lot of taking this out for consultation to a whole range of groups, and particularly through our sort of champions networks, we hope that we will be able to talk to people who do not, they don't feel totally comfortable with the sort of digital era that we are in. But I think what I would look is that, as I said, there are 4 themes, and they're very, very important. And if I go from sort of bottom upwards, data and insight, everything, I'm a bit known for sort of saying, well, okay, we're talking about something, but show me the evidence. What's the data on this? What exactly are we talking about? And more we need to know exactly what the experience is of our residents, how our services are performing, how we benchmark them against others. This is why moving forward with our digital strategy is so important. Sometimes we get reports, I think most people now get the sort of economic impact reports, which was so important during the pandemic to help us understand how our communities were being impacted by that. So I think that is really important. Then looking at people in terms of their sort of skills, and how do we empower colleagues to feel comfortable in this environment? And I mean, I know an awfully long time ago, I worked in a company that actually in the staff restaurant put computers all around the side walls so that while you ate your sandwich, you could play on a computer quite easily, and you'd be surprised how fast people became digitally literate. But it's how do we enable our staff, but also how do we use digital technology to improve our processes so that we are more efficient, more effective, and we have streamlined processes. And this all goes in with this strategy. But if we do something that is focused on minutiae at the moment, then we're not going to get the broader picture in the consultation, because we'll be taking respondents down certain tracks as if it's like, well, we've already decided what we're doing. We've got broad brush themes, and these have got to be developed. So I hope as many people as possible can engage in the consultation to find the right way forward. But it's not just about how many people in the Vale use a computer. It's much more than that in terms of going forward. So thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. I quite like this report. I mean, I think because it is a document for consumption by lots and lots of different people, I find it quite easy to read. I kind of like the way it's set out. I think we need to make sure that the comments from both Councillor Carroll and Councillor Johnson are heard, though, because this is part of the consultation, and our committee are here to do that, aren't we? So I think the comment on, I suppose, when it comes to digitalisation, robotic process automation, it will be part of it, but I'm also not sure whether this needs to be a technical document, because that's not its purpose, is it? So I think I appreciate that will be behind it, and it might be behind quite a few of the functions. I don't think it needs to be discussed openly in this document, but we really need, I think, to have that Welsh language user testing, as Councillor Johnson has said. And I think those comments, they should go forward. Anybody else want to ask anything on this one? No? Okay. That's fantastic. Thank you, Tom, for that. So the recommendations were that we review the draft strategy and the Appendix A, and that's, as I said already, as part of the consultation process. And the comments that we've just highlighted need to then be referred back to Cabinet, along with outcomes of the consultation and the proposed changes that others may come up with in a report. And I don't think there's anything else that we need to add to that. So can we move on this one, please? Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. And can we, sorry, Mark, you wanted to?
Sorry, just to check, Chair, are we
of
referring
course.
the comments back to Cabinet or just on as part of the consultation
Yes,
process
it's
that
part
Tom is
of,
undertaking?
yes, please, because that's our comments, and then comments from the others who are going to take part in the consultation then can go back to Cabinet in a report. I think that's what the recommendation was. That's great.
Just to confirm with Tom. Yeah, Tom,
he's
thank you,
happy
Tom.
with that. Thank you. So we had a hand to move from Councillor Goodjohn, and we had a hand to second from Councillor Hamilton, I saw. So we'll move to the next agenda item, if that's okay with everybody. And that's agenda item 9, which is the Welsh Language Standards Annual Monitoring Report from 2022-23. This is a reference from Cabinet from the 6th of July, and it's back to Tom. Thank you.
Great, and thank you very much indeed, Chair. And just a quick overview in terms of this reference. So the Welsh Language Standards Annual Monitoring Report, which is a bit of a mouthful, the report itself serves two purposes. The first is around demonstrating compliance with the 174 Welsh language standards that we're required to work towards, and also then secondly the requirement to produce a 5-year promotion strategy for the Welsh language. So Appendix A to the Cabinet report fulfills the first in terms of progress against the standards. It's structured as it has been over a number of years to provide members with an overview of the achievements, so work around web development that Councillor Johnson referenced, internal communications, the way that we manage customer contact, the provision of learning opportunities for colleagues in Welsh, training, workforce support, and also provide some reflection of the partnership that we have with Mentor Bro Morgannwg, and the significant work that is underway across the Vale with all age groups. Accompanying that is an action plan against each of the standards, giving in effect a status of our compliance as we see it with each of those. The second of the appendix, so Appendix B, then provides progress for members against the first year of the new 5-year Welsh language promotion strategy. Colleagues will remember that that's structured around the Cymraeg 2050 themes, so looking to increase the number of Welsh speakers, increasing the use of Welsh, and creating favourable conditions both in terms of infrastructure and, importantly, context. So within Appendix B, there's significant reference to partnership working. We recognise both in the delivery and the development of this plan that the council alone can't and shouldn't be the only ones working on this. So there's a huge amount of partnership working that we're very grateful to our partners for supporting. It also draws some alignment with the council's corporate plan and also the Welsh in Education strategic plan, which is a complementary document to the 5-year promotion strategy. For each of the commitments within the promotion strategy, and this is based on elected member feedback when we were developing the draft of that, we've provided updates against each of the actions under each of the themes, which show the progress. And also we've put some testimonials and pictures, an illustration of the progress. And that was something that I think was really helpfully suggested alongside the quantitative data when we were developing the strategy. So bringing it to your committee this evening, Chair, for any views and seeking endorsements so that we then look to publish. And I'll do my very best to answer any questions on what is a really wide-ranging topic covered in this report.
Thank you. Okay, committee, do we have any questions? Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thanks for the, as you say, it's does cover a wide area, and obviously this is the first year of the new 5-year promotion strategy that's being involved in here. I do think that taking Councillor Prothero's comments about the digital strategy into consideration, I think we should still be looking again at the way in which this is published. In terms of its format, it's the way that it reads. Obviously, you can't really get away from here's a big list of how we are reporting against an awfully large number of different standards, but that's where I think the suggestion of both case studies and user experience is so relevant to this, because I read a lot of process in this and I don't get a lot of feeling for what has really happened, and that was that the fact that this is it has slightly more narrative than previous years doesn't actually give me any sort of real understanding of what it's like for either learners within the council or users of the various services that we are partnering with. And we certainly, I don't think, get a feeling for what the Welsh community, Welsh speakers as a community in general, how they find life in the Vale of Glamorgan from this. It's reporting against requirements rather than giving me any sort of feeling vibrancy around what happens. Obviously, as a Welsh speaker myself, I'm going to make a broader point about the fact that we don't have an interpreter here for meetings yet. But I don't feel that the events that I attend or that take place in the Vale of Glamorgan are given the what's the right phrase of this in English? I don't feel this report, summarizes those in an effective manner. I feel I have a lot of a lot of process in front of me, and just there's not really going to talk through anything in detail, but I did just want to check around ICT software, because there's an item here about providing cysgeir, cysill and gwirio, and they're supposed to be on all committees of all staff. I'm just checking as an elected member, I don't seem to have those on my computer. So should I don't know if it's not probably the right place to ask this, but should I be going to ICT to get that done? Because doesn't seem to have happened automatically on my computer through any updates. And having the Welsh spell check is very helpful when writing to constituents.
I think Tom, can you take that back?
Yeah,
Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to see.
I was quickly just pivoting to make sure that I did have those on my desktop, Councillor Johnson. I do, so I will make sure that as action number one in our digital strategy, we'll be making sure that all our elected members also have those tools as well. We can do that before the consultation finishes. Thank you for the comments around the feeling and vibrancy not coming through strongly enough. It is always a balance of making sure that we are responding to the process and the compliance side of things when we're writing these reports. But I think that's a really fair challenge back to us. We've tried to bring some of that into this year's report, but I think looking forward to next year, there's got to be there are opportunities to put some more summary information that really does draw through some of that vibrancy that you were describing, because that's certainly the experience that I have when I'm supporting colleagues to participate in these kind of activities, and we need to bring that through strongly if that's not the case in this report, and we'll look forward to doing that, and maybe using some of the more innovative digital solutions to be able to do that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. And can I just clarify with you, Tom, this report is part of our of the requirements of the Welsh language measures, that we do this every year. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
So this is, okay, that's fine. So you have to respond in the way that they want you to as well. Is that true?
In terms of the first appendix, that's pretty prescriptive in terms of the kind of status against the standards. In terms of the Welsh language promotion strategy itself, because that's a document that we're required to produce, but the way in which we then report progress. There's an expectation to show progress against the actions, but there's certainly flexibility in terms of how we illustrate that and how we bring some of the activity to life. So
Yes.
I think we can respond to both what we're required to do, but also what the aspiration is that Councillor Johnson was articulating.
Yes. It is a nice idea, I think, to have, as Councillor Johnson has requested next year, some case studies. So the lived experience of Welsh speakers, and that would be a nice. I think that would be a really good addition. My only other request, which I've always made when it comes to the promotion of this, is just make sure that all of our comprehensive schools can actually provide A-level Welsh for students. I just feel, and I'm not a Welsh speaker, but I just feel that seeing as we do insist that everybody in Wales does it to GCSE, they should all be able to, should they wish, do it to A-level. I understand this may be resourcing issues, but I think it should be something that we try and work to make sure that it's an offer for all of our students. But that's my only wish. And again, it's not to do with the report, so probably not for now, but thank you.
I can certainly provide that feedback to colleagues in learning skills when they're putting the update together for the WESP.
That's great. Do we have anybody else who'd like to pass some comments on this report? No? Okay, that's lovely, thank you. So the recommendations were that committee needed to consider the report and endorse with any comments. But I think we can say that we've done that, it's noted. And can I have a hand to move now, please?
And just to confirm, Chair, that yourself and the committee are happy to endorse the report. And obviously the comments that have been made by the committee tonight, Tom is going to take back separately then. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll look to next year, I think. Thank you very much. So can we have a hand to move them? Thank you, Councillor Drake, and thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, to second. That's wonderful. Okay, so eyes down. It's agenda item 10, and this that was the last of our references, by the way. So now we are on the report of the Chief Executive. This is the Vale of Glamorgan Public Service Board Annual Report 22-23, and it's back to Tom.
Apologies, I'll bring some of the friends next year when we're bringing all of these reports together, so you don't have to listen to my voice or anything.
That's all right.
So as you say, Chair, this is the annual report for the Public Services Board being brought to your committee as the dedicated committee for the PSB's work as a whole. This report reflects on the progress made in the last year of the previous wellbeing plan. So members will note that we've brought on a couple of occasions the 2023-28 plan. This is the last year of the 2018 to 2023 plan. So the plan itself is based on 4 wellbeing objectives around involving people and making them feel able to participate in their local communities, focused on reducing poverty and tackling inequalities linked to deprivation, an emphasis on giving children the best start in life, and protecting, enhancing and valuing the environment. The PSB set a series of key priorities, so progressing work on the Move More Eat Well plan, tackling climate change, volunteering through the Value in the Vale programme, and also some organisational learning across the partners in terms of engagement activity. Committee asked when approving the new wellbeing plan that more information on the delivery of the previous 5 years work undertaken by the PSB could be reported. So this report seeks to not only reflect on the last year, but also the last 5 years, so covering the whole of the plan. It provides some information in terms of what's been done and what's been achieved, and also then looks to set the links between what is resulting from this plan and then linking that with the new objectives that the PSB in May signed off. So we've put some specific elements of work into the report, so you can see a series of case studies being provided to illustrate the work and the achievements to date. So things like Food Fail, the work of amplifying prevention, which is a new arrangement looking to harness what we did under COVID collectively and apply that to areas such as childhood immunisations, healthy weight, etc. the work around age friendly and the cost of living response as well. At the previous committee, when we were discussing the new plan, members also asked that specific parts of the PSB's activity should be scrutinised by individual scrutiny committees. So work is underway to look at how we can report age-friendly work, for example, to healthy living and social care, work on the Move More Eat Well plan, etc., etc. So that will happen throughout the year. Finally, the report provides you with some information about the evidence base. So some of that intelligence that was collected as part of developing the wellbeing plan and how that's being used by PSB partners to help monitor and inform the work of the partnership. So it's being brought to you this evening in your role, as I say, as the lead committee for the Public Services Board as a whole.
Thank you, Tom. Anybody like to ask any questions on this report? Thank you, Councillor Hanks. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Tom, I just wanted to say, you know, there's an awful lot of excellent work being done here, and it was a really pleasing report to read and to say well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hanks. I'll certainly take that back to PSB.
Councillor Johnson.
Yes, I mean, I'd like to sort of echo those comments. There's an awful lot of work that's in here, and I've been in, I've been engaged in some of it, and I'm sure most other councillors have been as well. I think I'm particularly interested by the very, very high positive response rates for the Value in the Vale project, and I'm sure that would be something that I'm interested to know which committee you got lined up for that to be reported to. Because I think while some of the age-friendly work, for example, is obviously some of these things are more obviously geared perhaps towards healthy living and social care. Some of them, will presumably go elsewhere. I did just, and I'm not sure if it's me or it's the way it's the way it's been done. But there's an awful lot of embedded pages within the reports that aren't coming up very well for me, and I don't know if that's a common problem or if that's just my technology tonight, Chair.
It's not your technology at all, Councillor Johnson. The report itself has been produced using Microsoft Sway, so there's a link. I think it's in the executive summary, or it's certainly early on in the report, which takes you to an online version of the report. We were conscious that some elected members have continue to have their papers provided to them in hard copy, so the Sway wouldn't work. So I think it's a reprographics issue that then has caused that in the PDF that's in your pack online. But what I'll do is I'll get you a link to the Sway sent, so you'll be able to see it in a way that is a bit more visually pleasing, and perhaps that's something for Mark and I next year, just to make sure that when the pack is being produced, that it doesn't look as if there are lots of copying and pasting, so we can pick that up, Mark.
Yeah, no problem, Tom.
I noted the same, and I had a sort of like a printed out copy because of the volume of pieces of paper in there. But it was a really, really good report, and as both Councillor Johnson and Hanks has said, so much good work going on. And I think it would be really smashing if the next time we have a report on this, that we invite one of the partners to come along and just to share with us the work that they're doing. I think that would be really, really good. And yeah, this sort of collaboration, it's too good not to share with our other scrutiny committees. And so as you said, you're going to be looking to do that. I think that would be absolutely brilliant. I think it will be good as well. I know that there are a couple of references to circular economy in here and how they're going to look for opportunities. But a really, really big opportunity for them would be to link in with Cardiff Met on the Circular Economy Communities Initiative, because they're all, I can see from the PSB report, you're already working with Cardiff Met in one respect. So I think because it is all about education, as we know, if you get what the circular economy can be used for, it can address so many other things, our decarbonisation issues, our social value. It does so much if we can apply those principles. And I think the PSB, we can get some circular economy champions in there through education. It would soar. It would be so good for them. So I would say that too. And I'm really happy to see that we're going to be piloting the food Vale anyway, the insecurity of food in the rural Vale, because that's really good, and that's going to happen this winter. So I'm glad to see that. Thank you, Tom. So do we have any other comments on this one? No? Okay, that's smashing. I think then we'll move to the recommendations then. As it's already a piece of work that Tom's working on, I don't know whether we need to include in here, Mark, that parts of these reports will be referred to scrutiny committees that are appropriate. Should that be a recommendation, or is that something that's going to happen anyway?
Just to check with Tom, Chair, I believe that's work in progress already, Tom, is that correct?
Yeah, I think, Mark, it might well be an open item in the work programme resulting from a previous recommendation of the committee. So we just now need to schedule those things in. And I forgot, apologies, Chair, to respond to Councillor Johnson in terms of value in the Vale. I think the intention is to report that to the Homes and Safe Communities Committee, because they've received a report previously on that, because it started as a scheme for council housing tenants and is now expanded. So I think that was the intention. Apologies, I forgot to answer.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. So if we can start with one recommendation then, if that's okay with committee, that for a future meeting, one of the PSB partners be invited to present to us parts of the work that they're doing. That would be wonderful if we could do that. And then the second recommendation, that members review the Vale of Glamorgan Public Service Board's annual report, which we've just done, and the progress partners are making in delivering the priorities as set out in the wellbeing plan. The next recommendation was that members make any recommendations to the PSB regarding the progress to date and future focus of PSB activity. And I'd like to make that recommendation, as said, that they actually link in with Cardiff Met and the Circular Economy Community Initiative, because I think that would benefit them greatly. And then the third, or was it the fourth recommendation, is that members recommend this report is circulated to all elected members and members of the Equality Consultative Forum via email, and also referred to Community Liaison Committee and the Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee. That was a lot to say there, big mouthful there, but I hope you got it all, Mark. Thank you. Can we have a hand? Are you okay? Thank you, good. Hand to move then, please. Thank you, Councillor Hanks, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Okay, agenda item 11 is the report of the Director of Corporate Resources. This is the annual delivery plan monitoring report, Q4 performance 22-23, and it's back to Tom. Thank you.
For the last time, I promise, Chair. So this report is, as you say, is the end of year Q4 performance. Traditionally, we reported this after the recess as part of a bigger report, which has now become the annual self-assessment report, which your committee will see in draft in the early autumn. But I was keen to make sure that you continue to receive a snapshot of progress as soon as possible at the end of the year. But as I say, you'll have lots more information, and this report will be supplemented by that annual self-assessment report in the autumn. So as usual, there's an appendix A to the report itself, which gives a presentation of the quarter's performance. The overall status in terms of progress in completing the activities and indicators for the corporate plan is green, and the presentation shows a breakdown of what's been achieved, and then particularly within the remit of this committee, you've got a performance snapshot showing showing the status of actions and measures across green, amber and red statuses. And as always, we provide a breakdown of any exceptions, so anything that hasn't worked to plan, and that's in Appendix B to the report for you this evening. Based on the exceptions, a series of areas of future focus and improvement are highlighted in the report. They include work on progressing the Race Equality Action Plan, some further capacity planning work in social care, supporting apprentices across the organisation, and progressing work on the Council's carbon management plan. So that's a really brief overview of the performance. Obviously, happy to take any questions, and this, as I say, will be supplemented in the autumn once that self-assessment report has been drafted.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, committee, any questions for Tom on the annual delivery plan monitoring report? Thank you, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tom. I think you've and obviously Appendix B highlights the exceptions, and we're all aware that that's the purpose of that, is to focus on some of the things that haven't been achieved rather than those that have, and therefore it can lead to a slightly misleading perception based on the amount. But there do seem to be quite a few items raised within here, perhaps more than I feel that we're used to. In particular, I just wanted to highlight or express concerns regarding the number of issues that seem to be related to whether it's voluntary sector or minority groups. It seems to be it feels to me that there's quite a few areas here. So the lack of development of a new framework for the council's relationship and work with the third sector. I know there's a report going to voluntary sector joint liaison on next week, but that's here. In fact, it was read. The implementation of the Race Equality Action Plan, customer insight that includes protected groups and socially disadvantaged groups to inform service design, development, delivery. There's an issue raised regarding LGBTQ plus work. Also the buildings and monuments review, ensuring that our adult services operates in conjunction with the third sector. It seems to me like a substantial number of red flags around that specific thread of work. And and I suppose that the questions I'm asking, therefore, and obviously there's a lot of narrative that's alongside that, but is that due to not being sufficiently resourced? Is that due to additional complications being attached to these pieces of work? It just feels to me there's a number of related issues there that I just appreciate having unpacked by you, Tom. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson, and absolutely, I think you're right in the sense of there being more red statused actions at the end of the year than we have seen in previous years. In terms, though, of the work around the voluntary sector, you're right, there's a report going to that committee next week, which very much seeks to consolidate a series of activity. And I think what I know is that when we were developing the service plan actions back in the winter of 2022, the world felt very different, and therefore some of the actions that we were putting in place that you're seeing as not moving as quickly as we would have envisaged them doing have almost been superseded by some of the activity that we've been working on since. So, for example, the work with the voluntary sector to establish that kind of strategic framework for how we interact with colleagues in the voluntary sector. We almost parked the kind of academic bit of that work while we were developing the response to some of the cost of living pressures and developing our warm welcome programme in conjunction with GVS and doing lots of the development with them. So I think the purpose of next week's voluntary sector joint liaison committee report is almost to bring us back to, okay, we needed to do something whilst we were dealing with that crisis and establishing some of those things, but it's now right and proper to look at taking forward some of the work in a more strategic way. And also we've had in the intervening period a series of national reports that have been published by Audit Wales that we've been working very closely with colleagues in the voluntary and third sector to start to develop a response to. So it's almost now about bringing together all of that activity and packaging it in one programme of work. So a huge amount has been going on. It's maybe just not, I haven't felt when I've been updating against these actions that it's particularly pertinent or relevant just to those actions, but there is a lot going on. And I would say the same in terms of the equalities sphere as well. So certainly when this service plan was published, we didn't have things like the Equalities Consultative Forum operating in the way that it is doing so now. We put lots of effort in terms of the frequency of those meetings, the breadth of organisations that are being represented, and the topics that we're discussing. So there's been a huge amount of almost foundational work that's been underway. The commitment around racial equality, again, is reflected in the council's commitment to providing training and support, the support for the diverse network, which has seen significant amounts of activity. So I suppose this is almost a case for me in the sense that we've set out some quite specific actions within the service plan that, whilst we might not have been doing work specifically relating to those, certainly across those agendas a significant amount of work has been underway, but because it's come in during the year, it's not formally reflected in the performance framework, and that's where there's just a bit of disconnect, I suppose.
Thank you, Tom. Anybody else have any questions for Tom on this particular report? I guess it's quite tricky, isn't it, when you're putting the remedial actions in there, but the mitigation of the reasons why you're where you are, as you've just explained, they can be quite complex. And it would make the report twice as long, wouldn't it? So that's quite tricky. If we don't have anybody else who'd like to ask any questions on this one, then if that's okay, I'll move straight to recommendations. And they were that members consider the Q4 performance results and the progress towards achieving the annual delivery plan 2023 commitments as aligned in our corporate plan wellbeing objectives within the remit of our committee. The second recommendation was that members consider the remedial actions to be taken to address areas of underperformance and to tackle the key challenges identified within the remit of our committee, with our views and recommendations referred thereafter to Cabinet for their consideration and approval. Those are the recommendations. We don't have any further recommendations, so can I have a hand to move, please?
Can I just come in, Chair, just very quickly on recommendation
Sure.
number 2. There aren't any, as I understand, there aren't any views or recommendations to be just referred to Cabinet now. So it's just purely to sort of note those remedial actions.
Sorry, Mark, if I wasn't clear.
No, I just want for obviously the committee's benefit and obviously any viewers as well.
That's great, thank you. So we have a hand to move. Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, and a hand to second it. Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. That's fantastic. Thank you. Agenda item 12, everybody. These are items the chair has decided are urgent, part 1. We don't have any. Agenda item 13.
Just to say on that one, Chair, we did with the minutes for
we
June,
did,
but
which we've already
addressed.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So
yes. So yes, the urgent item was the minutes. Then they've already been heard in. I think it was agenda item 3, was it? Anyway. Agenda item 13 then, those were items the chair's decided are urgent part 2. This is the bit where we would be excluding the public and the press if we did have anything, but we don't. So that's agenda item 13. So that really takes us to the end of our meeting. Thank you everybody for your perseverance. The next meeting now, because we have recess in August, won't be until September the 20th. So I really hope you all have a pleasant evening and also that you enjoy your summer holiday. And we'll all meet again in the autumn. See you all soon. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Chair.
Right. Thank you very much, Chair.